He wants me to come sooner.
Hello, everyone. We will get started in about 2 minutes here. If you have questions or can't hear me very well, please let me know now, and I can try to address that before we get started. Thank you. All right. Good morning here. I think I'll just give us 1 more minute. I just disabled the waiting room. I want to make sure that that works, and then we'll get started. All right. Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes, you're good.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. All right. So my name is Laura Eisner. I presented at the first training on bullying, if you were here for that. I got a cold, and so Abigail stepped up and took over last week for us. Thank you, Abigail. I have a little bit of a cough, so I'm going to try to keep that down if I can. But if my throat or voice cuts out, just let me know if I need to repeat anything. I'm happy to say things again or make sure I'm clear. Again, I'm Laura Eisner. I'm with the Education Law Advocacy Project. Here's my contact information. I have worked here for over 2 years. Before that, I was I've been practicing law since 2011, and I've been a prosecutor at a couple different counties doing child protection, juvenile delinquency, a little bit of criminal. I developed a lot of diversion programs. I sat on a team with some mental health providers and school staff to try to make it so that kids that were having struggles in school were not just suspended very quickly. They had other alternative means in place to get some help and services, and then also stay in school and stay caught up with their schoolwork. And so I've had a lot of opportunity to work in educational world around before I came into education law, like truancy courts and whatnot. And so I was very excited when this position opened up. I do also have a little guy. I have a truckload of kids, but I have a little guy. My littlest is he was a micro preemie. He was born at 22 weeks. And so actually I have a little bit of his information in here today because we're going to talk about IFSPs. And that's like a family service plan, what you can create with a school district for your child that has disabilities before they get into school. So we'll go through that today. If you have questions, please just unmute yourself and ask. I will check the chat here, but my screen doesn't allow me to see it very easily. So if you have something pressing, just jump in and interrupt me and we'll get to your question. Okay, and then this presentation was made available to everybody because we had a co-sponsor through the Minnesota Governors Council on Developmental Disabilities. They have been a great partner in helping us get out information and resources to people. And so we just wanted to do a quick shout out to them. This is their website and they have some great resources on there. They also have some other trainings as well for folks if you're interested in pursuing more trainings down the road. Okay, so a lot of you I saw were already registered for other trainings, so I'm going to go through this really quickly. If you do have questions and you want to know more about SMIRLS and the Educational Advocacy Project, we can talk about that at the end, but I feel like most of the people here have probably heard this spiel already. So I work with SMIRLS. It's the legal aid service for Southern Minnesota. We have this kind of weird county map here, which includes some of the metro, like Washington and Ramsey County, Dakota County, but then all of Southern. We serve people that are below at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. They have to, for our program, have to either live or attend school in the service area. So I have a family that lives in Hennepin County. That's not on our map, but they attend school in Ramsey County, so we can help them. So just like there's a little bit of wiggle room if they attend school in our service area, or if they live in our service area, but are going to, I had a young man who was going to a detention center north of us, and I was able to help him as he transitioned to that detention center to make sure that he had supports and things in place to help him with his academics when he was at that program. So family lived here, but he was up north, and we were able to still be involved and support him. So there's a little bit of flexibility with our team. The Education Law Advocacy Project was started back in 1995. It actually started as a law clinic. It was a little bit kind of difficult because cases didn't just end and start within a semester. And if we ever got an expulsion case as part of this program, like that has to happen in like a very quick fashion. And so, law clerks were, balancing this plus all of their other courses. And so this eventually morphed into just being solely at SMIRLS. We do take in law clerks though to help support us. It just is not a clinic. We work to build long-term relationships with our clients. We work to ensure that students receive the services they need. And then we want to make sure our families know what's going on because we're not always in their lives and their child's education might continue on while we're not there. We want to make sure that they know what steps we've taken and why, so that they can pick up where we've left off. Why we're here. This is Minnesota is known for having one of the worst achievement gaps in the United States. There's a lot of disparities between different races, ethnicities, socioeconomic statuses. And so generally that's why ELAP was developed, is to try to close that gap. And then there's a couple articles that came out somewhat recently that have this information and some data on it. Obviously COVID like threw everything up, like I would say the achievement gap that we're seeing is like widening, unfortunately, because of COVID. Now that kids are back in school, there's been a year or two of in school opportunities. Hopefully we can kind of work to to try to close that a little bit, but there are, still those difficulties that, because up until last year, I was still seeing kids with evaluations for IEPs that were done while they were online, and that's now being used in an in-school setting, and it just doesn't match up, right? So we just need to kind of make sure that we're catching up and we're meeting our kids where they're at now. I'm going to jump over this stuff because we've gone over it before. The cases that we prioritize and work through are listed on the last slide, but really we take any case as long as we're dealing with the school. If it's like they're in the building and they're struggling, or it's even they're having troubles getting to the building, like transportation issues, we can be involved. And we try to find ways to work with the schools. Obviously, the child's education time in school is short, and so we really try to focus on negotiating and navigating the school relationship with the parent, which is not always great when we first get involved. Sometimes we've developed like communication plans and things like that to really help with some of these things. We can help with enrollment, academic performance. We have the new law on reading. We're trying to focus on reading a lot with our clients, because a lot of our clients are coming in with, particular issues, bullying, they're saying the IEP is not working. And we also know that there was some recent issues with reading curriculum and how children were being taught how to read or not taught how to read. And so we're trying to also address that now that we have new laws that we can point to and ask for schools to kind of comply with and follow through with. Okay. And then if a client is referred to us, we obviously review their records, talk about their objectives, and we can attend meetings with them. We can do mediations, we can go to court, we can file complaints if we need to. So we have different options to go forward because we are attorneys, and based on how our program was designed, is that we are able to actually act as lawyers for the kids, and for the families that need us. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the individualized family service plans, IFSPs. Excuse me, sorry. Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about early intervention, like if there's signs that your child might not be demonstrating some normal developmental milestones, like they're not talking, not walking, there's poor balance, vision or hearing problems. If there's loss of skill at any age, that can be something just to kind of like see that there might be a concern. As from my experience, and actually I've had some clients with this too. If you have a preemie, the NICU, I think it's probably the NICU social worker, they work to make sure that the school district that you reside in knows that you had a little guy, and or a little gal, I guess, a little baby in the NICU, and that's a concern just because of like the loss of time and the and delays in getting out of the hospital that can impact how the child develops. So IFSPs are plans. It's kind of like an IEP. It's for an infant and a toddler up until the age of 3. An IEP is for 3 and up, well, 3 until they graduate. But the IFSPs are also designed to help support the family. So it's, they can't really do like, you think of an IEP, you can't like have special math curriculum for a baby, right? Like you need to help the parent understand like what's happening, what's going on, how to help meet these developmental milestones that they're not connecting with or having troubles with. And so it's really a family support to get services in the home or services in the daycare or wherever it would be to support and make sure that that family has information, the caregivers has information to help the child try to progress as much as possible. So IFSPs referrals can come from outside providers such as social workers, pediatricians, like I said, the NICU hospitals, just depending. My little guy, he had some vision issues, and so I think our initial referral came from because once he had the vision issues that were declared, we got connected with the like vision services, like a blind support group with Minnesota, and they helped us connect with the IFSP team, or they sent information to them. So There is child find requirements, and we talked about this last week with the attendance piece, but I just want to highlight that here. All of this, just generally, first off, all of this falls under the same statute idea, the Individuals Education Act. The IEP, IFSP all fall under this. Part C, which is like a little subsection of idea, is about IFSPs. And this part includes child find, similar to where an IEP, and that law requires child find as well. So it's different though, because you have kids that aren't in school, right? They're at home usually with their parents. Like, how are we going to be identifying that they're struggling or not, reaching these developmental milestones? And so that the statute goes into length about this, but that is a requirement on the school district to have a system in place to identify, locate, and evaluate all infants and toddlers with disabilities ages birth to 2 as early as possible. Now, school districts, they must coordinate with different programs. Some of these programs could include the Head Start program, child protection, welfare, foster care programs, child care programs, tribal agencies, the Children's Health Insurance Program. They have groups that do like maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting. All of these organizations, plus more, are great resources, right, for the school district to connect with and try to get referrals from for children that might be showing signs of developmental delay or other disabilities where they would need an IFSP. So Help Me Grow is something that I've linked in here. This is basically, it helps you just refer either yourself or a family or friend, or if you're a professional and another parent, to get evaluated for an IFSP. So it is a way to just kind of jump over all these other programs and just reach out and say, like, I think my child's struggling with certain developmental issues. We need to address this. Okay, so an IFSP can include different things like speech and language therapy, PT, OT, different medical services, hearing and vision issues, possibly transportation. That really just depends very much on the circumstances, but there's different things that could be included in the IFSP. A parent or guardian was work with the school district to get the comprehensive evaluation completed, and services can be offered in the home or outside the home. So they can like arrange for services to be at, say, if they're like doing early education services, that can be done. At the school, or they can go to the daycare if they need to, if there's certain things that are happening and that maybe the daycare provider would like to have some information too, and they're trying to like work together as a team. Just talk to your IFSP team and see what, how you can arrange for services to occur. Okay, so your IFSP is a plan, or a program, I should say. It has many different components within the document. It should include a summary of the evaluation, summary of all the developmental areas. And I've included some of these here that I actually pulled from a different clients. But this is not necessarily comprehensive, right? It could be other things as well, but it could be physical development, communication, and communication, not just words, but like the use of language. Like, do they understand what you're saying? Expression. In my example, my child, he cannot talk, but he can definitely hear us a little bit. And he has a lot of facial expressions, right? So he has some stuff that he can do, but he has to use sign language to communicate with us. Can the child think? What are their playing skills? And adaptive. Obviously, we're dealing with a lot of like babies and toddlers. Like, maybe they can't really feed themselves very well, but if they can't feed themselves at all, or they're not interested in food, that might be stuff to flag, right? If they don't, eventually learn to put their hands through a shirt, like maybe that's something that needs to be addressed too, right? Like if they're not kind of picking up on some of these adaptive skills. The child and family outcomes would be included, a service list. And then I forgot to add on here, we also have a transition, because when you get to like 2.5, you need to be moving and planning towards getting to an IEP if that looks like that would be beneficial for your child. Okay, so I took some clips, like screenshots of different IEPs or IFSPs, excuse me. So this would be like an eligibility determination. So this would be after the evaluation's done, the IFSP team and the parents all sit down and talk about what was in the evaluation, and they would determine whether or not they're eligible. So there's actually kind of a section in here that I took out because it had, confidential information in it, but this would be more stuff that you would list in here about like why they are found eligible and what they're looking at for what meet, why they meet, eligibility for intervention services. Is it because they're developmentally delayed? Are they deaf blind? Like, what is the requirement, or what is being found here that would show that they are eligible? And how did you assess that, right? The team needs to include that. Like, is it just review of medical records, or, what did a doctor were they interviewed? How did we get this information? The comprehensive evaluation should have a lot of data, and I mean, obviously you probably don't want to rewrite the whole thing here, but you would need to summarize at least some of the information as to why the child is eligible. Okay. The next part of your IFSP would have family directed assessment. This is voluntary. So in here, again, I took out some parts here because it had some, confidential information, but usually the IFSP team would meet with the family or the parent and say, like, why are you looking for services? What are your concerns? And then they just put a narration in here. They might just do an interview, but they could also ask for the parent to do, sometimes assessments will have like a parent component and then like an observation component. And so they can put all that stuff in here as well. They need to list down here what they did to get this information. So it has just a family guided routines based on an interview. Like, that was all, they just interviewed the parent in this one. But if they, had the parent complete some forms or questionnaires, they need to list that as well. And then above the check mark should be all of the information that the parent provided about what their concerns are and why, right? So it just adds more details to your IFSP as to like why services are needed, what the parents' concerns are. And it also kind of helps direct like where the goals might end up a little bit too. So the child and family outcomes, I said goals a second ago, and I should actually come back to that real quick. They're not goals, they're outcomes, because it's not written the same as an IEP. They're similar, but it's not the same, and it's it's an outcome versus a goal, I guess. The this is actually my goal. My goal when I was working with my little one with the school district is that he would increase his response to auditory stimuli, and he'll use a variety of sounds and vocalization. So like when we got him, like I think assessed, we were nearing, I don't know, over a year, but he had been in the hospital the entire time, and he had like had a lot of medical issues, obviously. And so he wasn't communicating, right? So, I told the team, tell the IFSP team what your goals are, what your and they kind of help you. They're supposed to help you narrow down like how your steps are going to be to that goal. My goal might be that he can, read a book someday. Well, that's not helpful right now. The first step would be like, maybe we need to, focus on, some early literacy goals, or like understanding, some like sounds, right? Like, you're dealing with infants, you're dealing with toddlers. You can talk about what your goals are for a family, and that's why the IFSP team will work on an outcome. Like, we're gonna look at this as like, what's our first little baby step to try to get towards what the parent wants to do, or what the parent wants and hopes for the child. It talks about why we're focusing on this outcome. They're supposed to include like where they currently are. Like, presently, the child, cannot communicate, or presently the child cannot walk, right? Like, where are they at the time that this outcome is written? And is there any progress? Like, and what are we seeing? Like, can they walk, but they need to have like support, or can they crawl but not walk? Like, what is happening now? And then the team has to have like a measurement or a way to and see if they're going to be successful, because it's not just going to be like the child was going to talk, because we want to like measure it, go back to our evaluation and like be able to say like, oh, look, this is where our gap was in our evaluation. and maybe we can redo that little piece of the evaluation, and that's what they actually recommended in this one, is they're going to redo this Oregon project, that's a type of assessment, and see if he's made progress that way. So they'll just keep assessing him and see what progress we've made on a consistent basis. That it's not just like a one-time thing, like we need to like actually, see some sort of outcomes here. They included a timeline as to when this is going to happen and how we're going to work on this. They're going to include, he has all these other supports, right? He has a hearing aid. At the time, there's a tracheostomy, like, and all this stuff is to just encourage him to play, like, and so they put this together in these supports, then they would talk to you as a parent or as a caregiver on like, okay, well, when this is happening, like, let's practice, rattling a noisy toy and then talking about that toy, right? To connect sound to the object. Or when he talks to you, repeat his noises back to him and point to objects that maybe start with that same sound, right? So if he says ba, point to ball and play with the ball, right? And try to imitate and have them repeat that sound. So well, those details aren't in here, but that's the hope, is that all this information will be provided and there'll be the continued supports for this family. They also have a deadline as to when they're going to try to assess and see how things are going, for the progress. So here we go. This is how we're going to get the information. Then we're going to do parent coaching. We're going to do, like virtual visits between the parent and the child when they're at the hospital together, to try to come up with strategies to help support the child when they're in the hospital together. They're going to integrate these integrate the strategies into the visits outside of the virtual platform. And then once he gets home, we're going to try to have visits in person and then continue to work to support the parent through parent coaching and ideas, that type of information. So all of that should be here as to how the IFSP team is going to support the caregiver, the parent, in navigating and moving steps forward for the child to reach what their outcome is, what their identified outcome is. Okay, this is the last part of the child and family outcome, and this is mine, so you guys can judge me because I don't have a periodic review that was ever entered on my form. And so, but that is something that would be should be on here, as like how often they're going to review. And then when in an IEP, they have like progress reports that like are a separate document that would go out to you on like how the child is doing. In an IFSP, sometimes they will just include that here. So this progress report could have been done in the future, and they could have checked like, continue with the following modifications, if the child continued to struggle, or could discontinue because that's not a parent outcome anymore. They want to switch it to something else, or we're going to continue to work on it because we think we've seen little steps, but the child's not yet met what we are looking for in that giant gap, on the assessment that we completed with the evaluation between now, whatever that is in the team. And that conversation should happen with the IFSP team, which would include the parent, right? To make sure that they're, figuring out what the next step would be for this outcome. Okay. So your IFSP plan should have multiple outcomes. We just went over was this one about communication, but I had other ones that I had for, goals for my son, right? And those are all listed in there. Same setup, right? We had to identify what the target is, where he's at, how we're going to get there, how we're going to measure that we've gotten there, because that matters, right? We don't want to just like say like, okay, we got here, but like, how are we going to actually know, like, what's the data? And then how am I going to be supported in getting there? And that's all my IFSP that I had for other clients. We need to have that. And the IFSP teams, they really want to work, obviously, and support the family, but that needs to be in there just so the parent knows what to expect, right? If they're going to be working to try to help a child who can't walk yet, like they need to know what to expect and how they're going to be supported. Okay. Excuse me. Sorry. So I just did a little snapshot of a service grid. In the IFSP, well, this is a little one. Usually there's a lot, right? There's a lot of different services and interventions that are happening. And it can list like who's doing what, where it's happening, the date that it starts, how many sessions it's going to be, if it's going to be individual, obviously a lot of them are, how it's going to actually look like, is it face-to-face, whereas down here, this is like consultative, like they're gonna more offer consultations to maybe the team, or is that, I don't know if that's called consultation to the parent. But that's something as well. And then how long it's gonna go on for, and all of this should be in here. It should be clear, like this one, early intervention, they're doing a consultative report or meeting. It looks like the early intervention and physical therapists are going to spend 15 minutes a week, or 15 minutes for 33 sessions, whatever that I guess equals. So not a week, but close, with each other to just consult about this child and try to come up with strategies to help the parent, and the child work through their family outcomes. So it's just another document, another section, just to make sure that if you're getting this done for your child, your early intervention, like make sure you know what that is. Like, is that something that, like, the early intervention person, is that a title, or is there going to be something else? I don't think it is, because here we have a sort of service coordination, right? And service coordination is different, where they're gonna, that's more like arranging visits and making sure that we bring supplies to the visits and things like that, right? So what does early intervention actually mean? Deaf and hard of hearing, this is all consultative time that they're going to be spending. And is that going to be somewhere else? Because they're not going to the parent's office, right? So how is this all going to look? And so it's just things to kind of ask questions about and make sure you understand how it looks going forward, and so that parent or the caregiver knows what to expect. Okay, transition planning, this is critical, right? Because our child is showing some delays in their milestones, and if they're not going to catch up and they're not going to be where they need to be, we need to start planning to get them onto an IEP. Excuse me. So transition planning, usually this is done, the child needs to have meetings with the IFSP team. They kind of see where he's at or she's at. They would click yes or no here if they're potentially eligible, and then they need to have a transition conference to talk about what this looks like. They start preparing for this around 2.5 years of age, and then at least 90 days before that child's birthday, they have to have that conference and talk about what it's going to look like to get an IEP. An IEP obviously has goals similar to the IFSP, because it's based on the evaluation, but all of that's usually done in an early childhood center or in the school, right? It's in the building. It's no longer in the home. And the parent aspect of all of this is not fully stripped, but a lot of it's removed. The parent still gets to have supports and training and information, but it's not so much on what the parent's doing with the child, because the teachers are taking over, right? We have school staff and school physical therapists and school nurses doing things, and school occupational therapists, and all of those school staff will be doing stuff rather than the parent trying to work on things at home with the child. So this is near one of the last pages of your IFSP, and then the last page would include a signature block. I did include this from a different IFSP that I found interesting, and I wanted to just share that so that you have an example of what it might look like. Here, I can go back. So here it just has required for all children when receiving Part C services, transition steps and services, this is all blank down here, right? But this one they're going to discuss with and train of the parents regarding future placements and other matters related to transitions. They're going to have procedures to prepare the child for changes in services, right? They're going to identify transition services for the parent and the child. That is nice to have this written out, right? There might be more or less, but this is some things that would be nice for the parent to have to go back to and be okay, what does our transition look like when we're going from an IFSP over to the IEP, where a lot of this work that I've been doing, and it doesn't mean the parent can't do it anymore, but the work that she's been doing is going to be also done by school staff, right? All right, so does anybody have any questions on the IFSP stuff before we jump into early childhood education stuff?
Does the eligibility require a medical diagnosis?
So no, it doesn't require medical diagnosis. It's easier when you have a medical diagnosis, but it could be other things too. So like sometimes children with significant emotional regulation issues, but there's no one willing to diagnose them yet, right? Like they're showing signs of maybe some particular mental health disorder, but there's, getting a young child diagnosed like with a mental health disorder is like, there's so much change and there's not a lot of people that want to necessarily do that, right? So it doesn't have to be that. It has to be that the child is having delays in some way or another, right? And so if they go through their assessments, and it needs to be comprehensive and looks at all areas of what could be causing the disability, and they go through the assessments, and there's like flags, right, that maybe not diagnosed, maybe they don't even have autism, but maybe they like fall within like an autism type of category or emotional behavioral type of category. They can get that services in place in the IFSP, and they don't have to have necessarily a diagnosis to support that, because toddlers, 2-year-olds, they just they change so much, right? Between when they're just a little baby up until, honestly, high school, right? So I think a lot of medical professionals don't want to do, those type of diagnoses. And then sometimes new diagnoses come along later on after, the parent's been working with the child for a while. So yeah, no, you don't need to have it. It always helps. I'll say, like, it's just easier for people to be like, okay, I have a label for it, like, and a different person saw this, or a different person sees this issue, makes it a lot easier, but it's not required. So
Thank you.
sure. Yeah. Anybody else? Or should I keep going? I'll keep plugging away here. You can interrupt if anything else comes up. Okay. So we're gonna just talk really quickly about some early childhood programs that are available to help children. Early childhood family education, early learning scholarships, and Head Start are the 3 that we're going to just highlight today. The early childhood family education program is educational services programming for families with children until the children enter kindergarten. The goal is to provide parents and guardians with support. There are some costs that are associated with the program, but people who are unable to pay can complete this program for free. And so this would be a program where an IFSP plus a transition to an IEP still might be a good fit, right? Because it goes up through the age of kindergarten, which the child will be 5. So early learning scholarships. There are certain things that would qualify you or a child for an early learning scholarship. A child of a teen parent, or the child's in foster care, or in need of protection services, or experienced homelessness in the last 12 months. And then I will say, go to the website and gather more information and see if there's other ways that you can make these work for you. But they increase access to high quality early education programs for 0 to 4-year-old children, because you can apply for the scholarship, and then the scholarship will help pay for some or all of it. I put in the link for finding the scholarship. I think the programs, in order to do the childhood programs, have to be parent aware awarded, I believe. So they have to be a certain level. But that is something to help with early childhood programs access for at-risk infants and toddlers. And then Head Start. So family income is equal to or below 100% of the federal poverty guidelines. Families on public assistance, families experience homelessness, or the child's in foster care is how the child would qualify for Head Start. They provide early childhood education. They have health and nutrition information, and they also have parent involvement services. And so this is a great program. They're all over the state, but one of the things that might be beneficial, like if you have an IFSP and your team is trying to figure out like how to best support the child, and you as your family, child's going to Head Start, you can ask them to figure out like how can we communicate the IFSP to Head Start. Do we need to go there? Maybe we can invite them to the meetings, include them in the conversations, because they're as part of this, right, they're doing early childhood education. So they're going to be working with the child, parents going to be working with the child just to make sure that everything's on the same page as they go forward. Similarly with IEPs, that can be communicated with them as well. So there's also things to look at for early childhood screening. So vision and hearing, height, weight factors, risk factors, language and speaking skills, parent report of social emotional development, all that stuff can be flagged on an early childhood screening as a concern. They have voluntary pre-kindergarten. If you meet the age requirements, you're eligible to participate in free voluntary pre-kindergarten. Some districts may develop other criteria to give a priority to students with certain risk factors. But so like I know some school districts will take in children if they're born like super close to September, right? So they're maybe even now they're still 4, but they're supposed to start kindergarten, you know, in a month or a couple weeks here. So they might be a good fit for like a pre-kindergarten program, right? But other districts, they can develop other criteria, right? If there's a child with an IEP already, or you know, significant speech delays or things like that they think might be an issue, they can make it, it's not required, but they could make it so that, you know, another student could enter it even if they are, you know, maybe they're 5 and they've been 5 for a while, but they need some, you know, additional support before they go on. So it just kind of depends on how the district develops the criteria. So yeah, so kindergarten readiness, just kind of talked about this a little bit already, but you'd be 5-year-old by September 1st. Received an early childhood screening that we just talked about, and then received the acceptable vaccinations and submit the paperwork. So that was quick. I'm gonna stop sharing. Well, I guess I'll come back to questions just quick. I want to say I'm gonna send out the PowerPoint. We have our contact information on here. And then we also have just some other resources. I don't think we've ever gotten to this on any of our trainings because we haven't had time. But we have social media. So we have more resources on social media. We have a website. And actually Ruben, is it out yet? Are you here? Our news or our handbook. We just finished updating the most recent handbook on children's rights or educational rights in schools. So that will be up on our website, I think this week. It's like all brand new information from the laws that came into place back, you know, in August of 2024 here. So that all kicks in at the beginning of the month. So we updated the handbook. So we're gonna have our handbook on the website. We're actually gonna be at the state fair this summer. So you can come visit us in the education building. And then we have a newsletter that goes out quarterly. It has tips, resources, and information. You can sign up here. So, right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Maybe. I can, there we go. Okay. So, I have a question here. Does terminated parental rights qualify for a scholarship? Like, is a child like a ward of the state? Is that the question?
Yes.
I believe so. Often they use the phrase foster care, right? But obviously that's not the same, like, because foster care sometimes just the way it's used is referred to just like as a temporary spot, whereas like ward of a state would not be, right? But I believe that they would qualify for that scholarship. So I would look into that for sure. Yeah. And actually the website, and see if I can pull it up here real quick. The website on here has a bunch of resources on like criteria that they look at, but then also like what scholarships are available for that early learning stuff. So let me make sure I have the right link. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be coughing in everyone's ear. So, does anybody else have questions about anything? I can keep talking and rambling about stuff if you would like to know things. So I can't see that screen, it's too small. So yeah. I can look into it and see if we can find the Board of the State information, but I'm gonna send you the link for MTE and the Early Learning Scholarship, just so you can have that right now. So. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? So I can tell you a little bit about my experience with an IFSP, just so you know. So I initially started with the school district. I'm gonna stop recording here before I share everything. Ruben, how do I stop recording?
It should be in when you click more
Okay.
in the bottom.